Hello everyone, it's Kerry Lee from Summit and Sage Furniture Redesign. Just showing you this piece here that I found on Marketplace on Facebook. It's actually one for my mum because she missed out on one of the other pieces that I sold to another client. So this is a commission piece, and here is a recording of what I do with the process with these pieces. So here we're cleaning our piece and we're removing the hardware and making sure that we get right into all those little edges and give it a really good clean. This is the dirty, disgusting water that I ended up with after cleaning this piece. So my original plan is to have these raw and then have this top raw. And I wasn't sure whether to do the shelf raw or painted, but I think I'll paint it to lighten it up a bit. And then the sides painted and the frame. So we'll see how we go. Now I'm on to, that's all cleaned or rinsed, and now I'm on to sanding the top there and sanding these down back to raw. So just really quickly, this cleaning solution I use is actually just an old cleaning bottle which I've rinsed out, and it's just got some sugar soap in it diluted down into some water. And then I use that with a clean cloth, give it a spray and a wipe, and then used a clean bucket of water to get all of that soap residue off, because you don't want to be sanding and painting over that, it won't stick properly. So here we are using an 80 grit sandpaper to get the finish off of the top of this entertainment unit. It's coming off reasonably easy as it was quite chipped and dried on the top. Now I've gone and got the 180 grit sandpaper on my sander. I'm just going to give this a quick once over. I've given it a bit of a wipe so I don't end up with any swelltail, sort of pigtail swell marks. Give this a once over with the 180, and then we'll move on to getting the drawers back to raw as well. See what's underneath them. So here she is all sanded. I've just noticed that there is a slight patch of what looks like almost an oily patch coming up to the top here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, I've just given it a wipe down with a dry cloth. I'm actually going to leave it overnight and see how much more that comes out. If this is a problem, I'll have to look at ways of covering it, or getting one of those slabs of slatted wood from hardware store and just laying something over the top as a false top on there, which will blend in fine. So stay tuned for this. So I'm back a few days later. School holidays keeps me busy. We're just giving this a light scuff sand with an 80 grit sandpaper on the mouse sander. As you can see, that's quite a quick rough up. You just want to basically make the varnish that's already on there rough enough for the paint to adhere to and the primer. So it doesn't have to look amazing. Try not to gouge into it, but just give it a bit of a rough up. I've used an 80 grit just with my little mouse sander there, and now I'm going to give it a wipe over, let it dry, and then I'll get onto the primer. I mentioned previously as well that there was a stain here. The where I think something had been lent on it or rested on it in a shed with the previous owner. I only noticed that after a little while after I'd sanded it. You can see it's still a little bit here, but I did clean it with some mineral turpentine and then went over it with a clean damp rag, and it's actually brought it up quite nicely. So I'll probably do that process again and then see how it comes out, and then go on with the whitewash, see how it adheres and go from there. So another quick wipe down and then we can finally start priming. I don't have any affiliation with any of these brands that I'm using, but this is just the primer that I use. It's an old tin that I've been using on all my furniture and it seems to do a really good job. Make sure you give it a really good stir from the bottom and get all those properties back up into the top so that it has good adhesion to your piece. Now I started painting and then realised I didn't want to paint my garage floor again. So I've put the piece up on these little tripods. They're just from eBay and they're so strong, and you can actually nail them in place if you're working on something on a bench or something that you can nail into. I've just got them on the floor. I've only got 4 under this piece. If you knock it, yes, it'll fall off of them, but it's not going to hurt anybody. It's only an inch and a half off the ground. But it just keeps the piece off the ground so you don't get fluff and things in your brush. There we go, you can see them there. Just a little tip. Good for doors and things too. To apply the primer, I'm using a very small paintbrush, another bigger paintbrush with an angled end, and then a roller, a small roller. You can use whatever makes you feel comfortable, whatever gives you the best finish, depending on what grain you've got on your piece. So this is how I tend to work. I get halfway through something and then I think of an easier way to do it. So I've just taken the top off. That way I'll be able to get these edges down to raw without upsetting this part. I can paint the bottom as I wish and not have to worry about getting any of that paint on that nice raw surface. And it makes it a lot easier to get into this shell to roller that. So I'll leave the top off until I finish with the bottom, and then I'll put it all together just before the top coat, and that way it'll all be sealed up and put back together. Very wet and humid here today, so the primer will dry overnight. And don't forget, you can glad wrap your tools ready for the next day. A quick sand with some 240 grit sandpaper and a wipe down with a damp cloth, and then we'll be ready for the next coat of primer. With the second coat of primer, make sure your brush strokes are even and in the direction of the wood grain. Now I'm just sanding the underneath side of the lip of the entertainment unit top so that it matches the other side. And then once I've done the whitewash and everything on it, I'll reattach it before I do the top coats. When using this kind of sander to do the edges, just be mindful to turn the speed down if it has that option on it, and just be careful with those small details or you might end up taking all of that moulding off. Quick tidy up again with the 240 grit sandpaper for the top and the body. For this I'm just using the 240 wrapped around a sanding sponge. Wipe down with a cloth. I'm using Porter's Paints Eggshell Finish in the colour Volcanic Ash. Make sure your brush strokes are even and in the direction of the wood grain. Now your first coat of paint won't be perfect. It's very humid here today and hot, so this is drying too fast for my liking, but that's okay. I didn't want to overwork the paint. So as you can see, it's quite rough. It looks more rough on the camera than it does in real person. However, we've got that light primer underneath and then just that slight neutral color over the top. So we're going to let that dry and then come back to it. I'm going to leave it for a while though. I don't want to be putting another coat on over semi-dried paint. And we'll get all those spots with our second coat. I'm going to move on to whitewashing this and the drawers and see how they come up. My wash mix is just some paint that I had left over and some water. Just find a mix that works for you and the piece that you're doing. I'm just popping it on, and then after I'll go over with long, even brush strokes. Leave the mix on for the desired look. Remember, if it goes too far, you can always sand it back after. So as you can see, it ends up a little bit uneven. Don't stress, it's wood, it's natural. It's going to take on some parts better than others. It actually looks better in person again, but what I've done is just use this damp cloth to give it a bit of a wipe over. First wipe, go from one end to the other, keep it a continuous line, and then I was just working on parts as I went along. What I can do now is I can grab out my sander with a really soft grit, and then we can just lighten up the bits that sort of take some bits off along here and even it out as we go. But I'm pretty happy with that. I didn't film all those steps again because it was extremely hot that day, and you saw it in the first round. This is the top coat I prefer to use. It's a water-based Cabothane clear and it won't yellow over time. This angle shows the very subtle sheen that the matte finish gives with the water-based coat. Light sand, wipe down, one more top coat and we can reattach the hardware. Make sure you keep your staging light, bright, clean and simple. Thank you so much for watching.